Hello and welcome to The Charging Point. My name's Robert Llewellyn and we've just had an amazing discussion at the Nissan stand here at EcoVelocity about electric cars, the future of electric cars, whether batteries are the right solution. We mentioned hydrogen, we mentioned recharging infrastructure. It was all very interesting, a brilliant panel. This is what happened. Oh, goodness me. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special debate about the future of electric vehicles and related topics. My name is Robert Llewellyn, and we're here today courtesy of Nissan Cars. I will introduce you to the panel. We've got a very, very marvellous panel here today. First of all, Mark Goodier, who a smooth radio DG and electric car owner. He has 3. That's greedy. That's just totally unfair. Next is Richard Candler. Beg your pardon, Richard. Richard Candler, who is the manager of electronic engineering at Nissan. Next. I do need a clipboard. I would love to have a clipboard. Dan Hill. Dan is hosting a new series on UK TV's Home Channel. It's called The New Reclaimers. Last but by no means least, sorry, Siân. How did that? Oh, it's because your name's at the bottom of a page and it's really wrong. So Siân is a sustainable transport campaigner with the Campaign for Better Transport, and she was a London Mayoral candidate. And she's also, which I really like this, a founder of the Alliance Against Urban 4x4s, which I think is an absolute affront, because it's a basic human right to drive a 3-ton car in a built-up urban area. Everyone knows that. So let's start off with range anxiety. This is the most common question in relation to the vehicles that you see around you, vehicles like the Nissan Leaf and all the other electric cars that are around here. Everyone goes, if I drove one of those, I'd have range anxiety. I just want to point something out very quickly. The General Motors company in America coined the term range anxiety when they withdrew the EV1, which was their first electric vehicle which they built. And when they withdrew the EV1, crushed them all and built and introduced the civilian Hummer. Not that I'm saying it's a biased concept, but I'm just putting it in historical context. So range anxiety.
Well, I'd put it in this context. 15 years ago, you never thought about charging up a phone because you didn't have a mobile phone, and you never thought charging up a computer because likely you didn't have a laptop. We are used to charging everything from toothbrushes to laptops, and we know that we plug our bits of equipment in when we know we're going to need them next day. And I've been driving electric vehicles for about 11 years, and I did, when I first got a Ford Think in 2000, run out embarrassingly because I was sat listening to Pete Tong while my daughter was horse riding, and I didn't realise that having the heater on and the energy drain from that and the radio would mean I didn't manage to get back home. And my wife came out to tow me home and was less than amused. But you only do it once, and that was a very long time ago. Since then, all of the way that you use battery-operated technology has changed, and how we use it. And I just don't think range anxiety is an issue. I never think about it. I just drive the car home. If it's got less than 40 miles left on it, I plug it in, and it's got 110 in the morning when I go out.
Dan, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, the anxiety is a lack of knowledge. I think a lot of people out there don't really know much about it, and there's a lot of adverts for all the eco cars, electric cars, but there's not a lot of knowledge out there, and that's where the anxiety comes. I think once you have knowledge and you know exactly the miles and you test drove something, then you would be wouldn't be so worried about it.
Very good points. Thank you very much. Now, this is something I've certainly experienced and have recently charged my car. I drive a Nissan Leaf, and I drove into London recently. I stopped at Junction 8 services on the M40. I live out in Gloucestershire, and there's a charging point there, and it's right next to where the coffee is, and you don't have to walk as far, and you plug it in. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's quite interesting. So it is emerging now, a charging infrastructure to make it realistic. So the next question really is, does the UK charging network need state support, or should it be private companies? Richard, can I ask you first?
Yeah, of course. Certainly from Nissan's point of view, we believe that at the beginning the majority of people charge from home, and we've put an awful lot of emphasis in making a good home charging solution, because in the majority of the time your car is sitting on your driveway not being used, and it's a perfect time to recharge it while it's not being used. I think we've got to think about as we move to the future. the public infrastructure allows you just to go further and further, and we've got situations in the UK, certainly in the northeast, where people are driving up to Edinburgh using the quick chargers that have been put in place as, for example, these plugged in places initiatives that have been sponsored by the government already. So I think there's something being done. Of course, more is always better because it will encourage more people to get out and use these cars.
A point I'd make is I think what government is missing out on when it comes to electric cars, they see them as a drain on resources. We need to subsidise all these charging points, but there's a real chance. I mean, one of the things that is an issue at the moment in terms of decarbonising transport is that most of the electricity that goes into these green cars is not green electricity. And green electricity, as we know, is a bit dependent on the sun and the wind and things like that. And what the government needs to do is to be able to store more of this electricity. And actually, car batteries are an ideal potential way of doing that. If you think about how cars are all plugged, most cars are not being driven at any one time. If they're plugged into the network, they've got a battery, a two-way charging point that use those to sort of boost electricity that was stored from previous generation from the wind when there wasn't any wind. That would be a brilliant idea, and I think government could really invest in something like that and do something brilliant with our electricity network as a whole by using people's cars, not just sort of subsidising them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely has to be a lot more government subsidy. I mean, a lot of the effort seems to be into the major cities like London and some of the northern cities as well. I mean, I live in Brighton, and I think we've got 2 charging points in the whole city. So that, if more people were using that, just wouldn't be practical. And I don't seem to think there's much movement in those sort of areas. So I think at the moment it seems to be concentrated on the big cities, but it needs to be rolled out across the country if this is going to be a proper, sustainable way of transport.
But now the next question, which is very often used, particularly as a sort of a way of criticising electric cars, is what you were talking about just now, Siân, is about are electric cars green? I mean, I have very big issues calling any large machine that's made in a big factory green or eco, but that's maybe a personal thing. But clearly they are cleaner. There's no tailpipe emissions. But the next question is, which is very common, is where does the electricity come from that charges them?
We've got to consider what's called well-to-wheel, which is the creation of the energy to the actual usage. And electrically powered cars offer a massive advantage when you consider the total life cycle. We've got to think about petrol is now coming from further and further away. It's having to be transported around the world and then refined, then put into lorries and transported to petrol stations, and that's just before you even put it into your tank. The distribution of electricity is very, very efficient, and that's one of the biggest advantages of an electric vehicle. Even if you consider the mix of UK fuel, like power generation and fuel used, electric cars are still at the best end of vehicles on the road in terms of ecology. And then if you look at Scandinavia or even into France, where you've got a large amount of renewable energy creation and also nuclear power generation, then those CO2 figures are almost zero.
You do have the choice of going with a green tariff, and I did put my money where my mouth was in that respect, because we put solar on the roof, which we worked out with a 2.94 kilowatt installation would charge 2 cars for the year, and we also run a green tariff with British Gas Electricity. And I just think if you are saving money driving these vehicles because of a government subsidy on the price of the vehicle, or free parking in London, or a congestion charge exemption, or no road tax, you can make a choice about whether you go and purchase green electricity if you're not already generating it.
Very good point.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the sort of fuel mix used in the UK now, and they're not that green, but I think they are really exciting in other sort of green ways, looking at sort of air pollution, the idea that a car can go past you, and noise pollution as well, the idea that a car that's electric can go past you and it won't make a noise and it won't spew even a tiny amount of pollution at you, maybe just a bit off the tyres. That's the extent to which they'll hurt your air quality. That's really exciting when air pollution kills a lot of people. But it does need to be solved. I mean, electricity is great though because it's flexible. It's not a fuel. It's a means of carrying energy around, and you can generate it in all kinds of ways. So, moving on to electric gives you the potential to be greener in all kinds of other ways. And I think it is, a step forwards, if not the perfect solution now.
I'm going to jump to the batteries question because that's a very common one, and it's come up a lot recently. And basically, batteries are the Achilles heel of these cars, because a lot of people are going, what about the battery replacement costs? There was a period of time when it was all range anxiety. Then it was mentioned on a particular popular motoring show about the battery replacement costs, and I got probably 1,000 tweets the next day about, what about battery replacement costs?
Yeah, sure. So battery replacement costs, I think we've got to consider first of all the necessity of replacing the battery in a Leaf. We are completely committed and completely behind our technology in terms of the life of this product. So 80% battery capacity after 5 years and 70% after 10 years. And that's something that we know to be the case. We have actual data, test data that shows that this is the case. Even in the case, as pointed out, you can replace individual modules inside the battery. The likelihood of ever actually replacing a whole battery is almost nil. So I think that's a really important aspect. I think secondly, when you look overall at the total capacity of the battery, as we've said, it's more than enough to make up the total range required for everyday usage. So we're completely, we completely believe in the technology inside Leaf. You really need to experience the car itself to understand just how good it is.
I think we have an issue with sort of the raw elements in batteries. I think the prediction is we need something like 2 million electric cars on the roads in the UK to meet our carbon targets by 2020, something like that. Now that's a lot of lithium in the batteries that you're going to need to get, and if you looking at it as a worldwide solution, that's a heck of a lot of lithium.
I think it's an important thing to point out, because that's one of the things I learnt about batteries, because when you hear the term lithium ion, you think that underneath there is like half a ton of lithium. But am I right in saying it's about 2% of the mass?
It's about 4 kilos of lithium used in it per car. So it's a relatively small amount. And as you said, it can be reused, not just in terms of the cell level, but also at a module level. As you discussed, the storage of energy is going to become very important in the coming years. And we believe that these batteries it will be possible to reuse them in the home to store sort of 2 or 3 days worth of energy.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, on this one, I would say I do think it is a little bit the Achilles heel on this one. I think it's not so much replacing the battery, but it's the charging time. And I think, for me, that's the slight difference between electric and hybrid. I think, I think it still needs to move on a little bit more, because for someone who's thinking about it and they're going to make some of these massive journeys, to have to then plug your car in for that. It's okay for doing the small journeys, and on that sort of scenario, I think definitely electric all the way. I think if you are making larger journeys, it's then for me, I think that would cause problems.
I mean, is there, from your point of view, is it in the pipe works, as it were, that there will be batteries for even cars this size that will give a longer range? Because 100 miles seems to be the kind of, at the moment, where we've got to.
I think, again, we've got to understand about the necessity of having more range. Is it really required, first of all? I think it's natural that we'll start to see increases in battery technology over the years, and we'll see increased range. I think that the question really is about which comes first, or what does the consumer actually want in terms of recharge? Because we think 30-minute recharge is actually pretty good. We think that encompasses an awful lot of use cases. So I think we'll definitely see developments in battery technology. I also don't think that lithium is necessarily the only solution for battery technology in the future. So yeah, I think it's really about there will be some future development that we'll see better range potentially, and lighter, smaller cars.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Now, I would love to open up to questions from the car park, I suppose we can call it.
What's the panel's opinion on the Ampere's technology, extended range?
Ampere's technology. I mean, I've driven one. I don't know. Has anybody else driven one?
I haven't driven one.
Well, I'll have to answer that because I'm the only one who's driven one. I think it's from a point of view of engineering, stunning, exquisite, brilliant. But from the point of view of the myth or reality of range anxiety, if you had an Ampere and you drive it a short distance every day, you wouldn't use any petrol. And then on the weekend, when you drive to Scotland, because that's always the one, you've got to drive to. I never knew so many people drove to Scotland. How am I going to drive to Scotland? When did you last go? 1957. When you drive to Scotland, you can drive to Scotland. Next question. Gentleman at the back there.
Well, just picking up on the price you were saying on the costing of the car compared to a petrol car. I suppose one of these is like a small mortgage. How are you going to get people into it by dropping that price?
I mean, yes, what about the cost? Because they are more expensive to buy.
It's the same point. It's about total cost of ownership. You've got to consider it costs something in the region of £1.70 to do 100 miles. You know, if you looked at in a diesel car, that's something like £7.50 at the moment, and the prices are only going up and up and up. There's no real maintenance on a Leaf. You know, there isn't any oil to change, no fluids to change. You know, it's brake pads. That's about it, really. You've got to think about things like company car tax, which is exempt from road tax, privileged parking spaces, even free electricity in a lot of the charging bays. So when you look at the total package of the car, then that's really how you've got to consider the cost. I think secondly, you've got to realise this is one of the first mass production electric vehicles on the road, and of course, you know, as we refine the technology, as we make more of them as well, we will reduce the cost undoubtedly.
That overall cost of ownership point is well made, but also there's a lot of pride, and maybe not pride, but a lot of fun to be had never having to go to a petrol station. In that 10 years I owned the Ford Think before they scrapped it, you just had to change the brake pads and put some more water in the batteries once a year. So there was absolutely no service charge, and you know that's a remarkable feeling.
Actually, there was a moment when I had to buy screen wash for the Leaf, and I was really upset because it was 100 miles. 100 miles worth of electricity. It was like £1.40 for a bottle of screen wash. I meant that is outrageous. I was really upset. Do you want to make any other points on the? Well, you could. Yeah, no. Dan, sorry.
No, I sort of agree with what you're saying. That, yeah, it is expensive at the moment, but with oil prices just shooting through, and they're going to continue shooting through the roof. Oil isn't going to get cheaper. You know, we're getting to a peak oil situation soon. So, at the end of the day, it's more environmentally friendly, and it's going to be cheaper.
Thank you. I want to be reassured that if I make an investment in an electric car, given that there are alternative technologies, that I'm not investing in a big four-wheel white elephant. And is this going to be the predominant alternative technology to oil?
I can tell you as a driver. Shall I tell you as a driver? And there are several Leaf drivers around here. I've had one since March the 21st, and it's my son who's 17, and we've had all sorts of cars, Mercs and Volvos and everything. He says it's the coolest car we've ever had. It's an amazing vehicle to drive, and there's absolutely no danger of, if you owned a vehicle like this for 5 or 10 years, that you wouldn't be able to sell it for a reasonable return. And like I said earlier on, just in case you came in late, if your circumstances are that you're in London and you use it to come into London, the upside benefit of owning this is extreme, actually. I think it's almost embarrassingly good for people who live in London and go into W1 every day.
Just one thing to add from
Yes,
Nissan's perspective. We've put $5 billion into EV development. We have another 3 completely different models under development at the moment. From our point of view, this isn't a publicity stunt or a niche model. This is something that we think will make up a significant mix of our future vehicle lineup.
I was just wondering what your opinions on hydrogen fuel cells were.
Yeah, no problem. So we have fuel cell cars. We have them running, and no problem. We could introduce one within a few years. I think the issue is where do you get the fuel from? And we come back to this well-to-wheel argument. So generation of hydrogen isn't a particularly low-energy process. And again, you still have the distribution as well, put them into tankers, putting them to hydrogen fuel stations. The big advantage of electric is that it's available today. Ultimately, there is a plug. Even in the middle of a car park, there's a plug within a few meters. And the distribution of electricity as an energy source is very efficient, which is why we have the solution today. It's difficult to say what's going to happen in the future, but if hydrogen becomes a hydrogen fuel cell becomes the main consumer demand, then we're able to deliver that technology.
I mean, I think the 2 points I would like to make. Now we are winding up. The floor managers told me. The 2 points I'd very quickly like to make is the beautiful Honda Clarity, which I've been lucky enough to drive. It's a fantastic car. The fuel cell in that car cost £250,000. Just the fuel cell. Car's over £1 million. That's one thing. Yes, it'll get cheaper when it's mass produced. Yes. But the materials in a fuel cell are incredibly rare and incredibly expensive in a lightweight automotive fuel cell. I recently saw a domestic fuel cell using commonly available materials, much cheaper to produce. It's really big and heavy. Rubbish for a car, brilliant for your house. It would generate all the energy you needed in your house. Fuel cells are fantastic, without question the future, but then I don't believe they're the future for small passenger cars, diggers, trains, ships, anything like that. Brilliant idea, but not for cars. I mean, maybe in our grandchildren's lifetime, because there'll be new technology, but I think it's been used as a sort of mythical future. I'm old enough to remember in the 1970s oil crisis, I saw a film in a cinema, because that's where we used to watch moving images, and it said, "The future is hydrogen." Well, that was 35 years ago, and it's always in 15 years' time we'll be driving hydrogen cars. In 15 years' time. That has been going on for 40 years, and we're still not doing it. And these cars work today, every day, really easily. And where does the hydrogen come from at the moment? The easiest and cheapest way of producing it is splitting it from fossil fuels. And that's why big fossil fuel companies really support hydrogen. That's where it comes from. 90% of the commercially available hydrogen in this country comes from fossil fuels. That's what we're using. So there's a lot of things to overcome before we drive hydrogen fuel cell cars, and we've got to stop now, because they've run out of tape. Thank you all very much for listening and watching, ladies and gentlemen. You've been a great audience. Thanks very much indeed to the panel. Thank you. And read the charging point. Go and have a look there. It's wonderful. And Nissan are lovely.